Welcome, everybody. This is the last class before your papers are due, which is, of course, Wednesday. And I've received several, I think it's a good sign. Several students have sent me samples of what they've written or sections and sorry, uh, questions, of course. Now, though, is a good time to ask questions before the due date if there are any remaining that I haven't already answered, which, of course, I also can do by email. And the cutoff, though, for anyone who wants me to give you specific feedback, if you choose to, about your uh, text in your paper, part or all of what you've already written before the deadline, it needs to be by 5 p.m. tomorrow because need a little lead time, of course. And I'm already going to respond to a couple that sent me their sections or part of their draft, I guess it is, right? Of their papers by email late last night, and it had been a long day, so I just will get back to those people. I think it's 2 people by tonight, usually before 6, before dinner time. So 5 p.m. tomorrow would be if you send me something to respond to after that, I may not see it. So you could do that today or tomorrow. And now, of course, is a good time to hang on. Let me admit. And now is a good time to ask any questions you have that I haven't already answered. Hopefully I have to, clarify thing. I'm going to give you, again, I think I'll be this, second time on Zoom and third time if you count the email I sent everybody with the cover sheet, all the detailed instructions in a couple of minutes, as soon as I answer any outstanding questions or urgent questions. Okay. Hi. Yeah. So does anybody have any specific questions now about what I think we've covered pretty thoroughly, but of course I understand not everybody was at all the Zoom sessions or maybe overlooked something, and that's why I'm here. Okay, anybody have any urgent or immediate questions that I can answer very simply now before I give you the specific restating the instructions I already sent everyone by email over the weekend? Anybody? Regarding your papers. I mean, we are going to spend the class on Wednesday discussing the first midterm. We will do a reduction exercise, and I think you'll all be happy with that because I'll reduce the total list of study list by at least a third, maybe more. And that's already in writing. I promise that at the front of the syllabus, at the top of each semester's syllabus for every class I teach, that I cut at least 33% of the total slides, but it's an open book, open note test anyway, right? However, those will be slides you only have to think about, right? We'll do that together as a class. And then we'll do the same thing, this is on Wednesday, in preparing for the midterm. The first, there's 2 midterms. Now they're required, we are, all of us in art history, to give 3 tests instead of 2, like I used to. So for the first midterm, it's pretty standard, and I'll explain exactly, I'll show you a sample, what it looks like. You'll get all the information you need to know about what to expect, how to study for it, and how to answer the questions. We'll do all of that on Wednesday. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't finish. We will also reduce, here we go. We will also on Wednesday together as a class reduce the number of terms to know by about at least a third as well. And that way, you need to have your syllabus and your list of terms to know in front of you. To do that, we'll just go together as a group and cross out the ones that aren't going to be on the test. Okay. That'll take a good chunk of time on Wednesday, and then we'll discuss how the test is given, and then I'll answer any questions. As far as review goes, it's there on YouTube. All the lectures are on YouTube. So I'm not going to do the old traditional in-person review in a classroom where we try to rush through, which you can't do anyway in one week, what you covered in 6 prior lectures. So it's all on YouTube. And I hope everyone saw, I sent the YouTube lectures for the glitchy session we had, I think it was Monday, early. And I sent actually both lectures of the Monday and Wednesday lectures. As well as, another question. I have a question now for anybody who can speak up on this. Just to cover the bases, I sent 2 emails today. It looks like they got through. We have a good, attendance today, which was first the link I made sure that it didn't get doubly clicked. I might have done that inadvertently on, I guess it was Monday. Uh, or was it Wednesday? I can't remember. So that's one way, is the link is, of course, a single line with the actual Zoom meeting thing. You just obviously click into that or log into it. Or the other way is the old traditional way I used to do until my daughter actually showed me how to just do the forward the link, which is a hand type in the exact, and I triple checked that it was the exact set of numbers, 11 digits. Okay, I sent that as a second email in case somebody had trouble with the link. So it worked apparently, right? Nobody had any trouble or had to work around it. Last week, there were some people who had to do a workaround to get into the Zoom session, and that isn't going to happen again, I'm pretty sure. I mean, unless there's another kind of interruption, such as a power outage or Zoom, you know, kick out, I call it, when you get booted out of Zoom. That is beyond my control, of course. But I always resend the invitations within 5 minutes. Keep that in mind if it happens again this semester. Okay, you guys got some rain up there. We got a little bit down here. It's helpful, right? I mean, I hope so. That might mean our fire season, knocking on real wood here, right below where my computer is stored here. That hopefully this year's fire season won't be as bad as 2019 or 2020 was for all of us. All right, Andy, one more time, any questions? Because then I'm going to now segue into the, for the last time, instructions about submitting the papers. By the way, they're due by midnight. Yes, yes. Okay. Maria, can you unmute yourself? You should be able to unmute yourself, but I can unmute you.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Oh, good. Hello.
Good. Go ahead.
Okay. I'm sorry if you've gone over this. I've missed
It's
the
all
last.
right. Just go ahead.
So in the format, in the paper, how do you want these to show up? The meaning, the photo, the
Oh, okay. Actually, that is very valid because I didn't get necessarily that specific about the order in which it would be good. You don't absolutely have to do this, but here's what I would suggest. The text is the first thing. I would put the illustration at the end of the paper. It should be on a separate page, and it should be the whole page or close to it. Remember that if they're too small, there's points off, because whoever grades your paper, me or the readers, will have to be able to see the details. So I would do the text of the paper first, and then it's up to you to decide. But you do need to keep these separate and label them. The two sections are the meaning, at least 2 full pages, and the formal analysis. You can start with the formal analysis if you prefer that, and cover all 10 elements. You remember from the list of 10 elements I've already sent everybody. You can do that first, and then a separate labeling or heading for meaning, or the other way around. So anyway, that should be at least 4 pages. That's the text. And then you could either do the illustration right then or the bibliography. Most people do the bibliography right at the end of the paper because it's logical, which shows me what sources you use. Remember, the requirements for that are also already out there. I sent that to everybody by now. The 5 requirements for research papers as to what type of citations someone asked me about NoodleBib, and I guess there was a problem with accessing it. I was able to do it, but that doesn't prove that everyone can. There's another way to get information on how to cite specific sources in the MLA procedure or format correctly, and that is your own library. I'm talking about the campus libraries. They have a research desk, and you can do it online, or you can call them up, or you can go in person to either campus library. They're both open again. At least last time I checked, it were as of late last week. I've been to the library several times this semester on the main campus, and right, you walk in on the first floor, I think it is. Well, maybe it's just like, anyway, you'll find it. It says research desk or some phrase like that, and then there'll be live people to tell you, if you want to do it that way. But you can also do it online. So of course you can navigate your own Santa Rosa JC website to find the library, and then the section underneath the listing online, the website, whatever they call it, the link to the library, as to which link to get to the information you want about citing, say, a book or a video or an interview with an artist. Okay, that's important. So in other words, it's your call as to which section you put first, but you do need to keep them separate. Then I would do the bibliography and then the illustration. But if you want to do the illustration and the bibliography last, that's fine. What?
Thank
Sorry,
you.
I hadn't, those things don't stay on long enough. I was just starting to read that last thing. Sorry, I didn't really have a chance to. Then we want to state the question that was just on the screen because as I was just starting to read it, it disappeared. Because
Uh,
that's what we're here now for, is for me, because your papers, of course, you have
I
now.
was just wondering if there was a time period like cut off, like we can't do like an art piece before a certain time or
Oh,
something.
no, no,
I thought I remember hearing that at one point, and I
no,
just couldn't get it
I've
out of
been
my
saying
head.
the opposite all, what,
Okay.
weeks now. It's your call. I don't want to limit people. I don't think I ever did. Maybe when I first started teaching here, I thought we should. But no, it can be from any period, style, artist, culture, country, continent, but the only limit is not your own art. That
Okay.
would be cheap.
I was just starting recently, and I just wanted to make extra
Sure,
sure that I wasn't like
sure.
accidentally doing something wrong.
The
Okay.
point
Thank
of
you.
why I make it sure I do that is, and I think most art history instructors at this JC do. Yeah, cave painting is fine. That's the key. There we go. Or two things. One is to find 3 or more new sources. So if you pick something that's not well documented, that might be a problem and you might have to switch. But that's something you can find out when you do the research, which hopefully everyone's already done the research and you're working on the final draft by now of your paper, but that's one thing, is any work of art you can find at least 3 sources on. And the other is pick one you like, what one you care about or that you're really interested in, or even passionate. I think that's not too strong a word. I know several of you have already mentioned that in your mini bios, that you get passionate about certain topics. That's what we're here for. So you care enough to really want to add your personal, so many of you have so many different life experiences that you bring to the class that could have some influence on, you know, what work you are choosing because you're passionate about or you want to learn more about. So, I mean, obviously, that gives you total carte blanche. I think that's a French phrase. Open choice, a huge, broad selection of the art from all around the world. This is a world art course anyway, as you
Um,
know. Okay, like the picture of the printed source, I'm not quite sure how that question I can answer, or is that more between you guys? Because yeah, the picture should be, you know, clear color. Well, we covered this. I don't want to waste a lot of time.
oh, I was asking if for the printed source, if it's a picture from a website, do I cite the website and also include that picture in my paper?
Oh, if it's a picture of the art you're actually writing about, but you don't have to, if it's an extra image and you have a main illustration at the end, like I said, which is your, you know, main image, you have to have just
Right.
one.
I have my illustration, but
Oh,
then
okay.
you said we need a printed source,
Mhm.
and the one that I found is a picture of the printed source on a website.
Oh, okay. So I'm confused. If
It's like a newspaper clipping.
oh, well, then it's okay. You just include the reference to the source. If it was originally printed, and say that, don't forget to say, if it was originally printed, but you found it online, say from an original, I've said this of course before, but just to reiterate, originally from a printed source. And that'll tell me or the reader that you covered that requirement.
Okay, cool.
If it's a
Thank you.
digital art piece, although you got to have a still image of it, just for us to be able to look at. It's just too complicated to try and navigate through others. Yeah, it does require a single image. For what about a movie? I think we talked about this. Did we? Maybe not. Or perhaps it's like previous semesters. A movie still, or let's say if you like, you know, early Disney art. I'm talking about not even getting into what movies the characters or heroes or whatever they are, villains from any, you know, period of film. What do we have, over 100 years of film history in the world today, not just in America, right? So you could pick a still from a movie or a cartoon film, you know, that's not live action, of a scene that interests you, and that's a work of art, because I think they're either called stills or cells, I think is the other word. I have a cousin who works for Disney, by the way. A cousin, excuse me. He'll hate me. A nephew, and he's the one that did all the special effects for the first 2 Iron Man movies, he and his partner. So that's why Disney hired him, because if you saw those 2 movies, it's pretty incredible special effects. Yeah, he was doing like 12-hour days for 3 weeks in a row for certain scenes. So he's a very self-actualized. He only went to 2 years of community college. That's all he did. He got an AA in design, and now he's loving his job and the work he does. So you can pick a still image from any kind of, you know, a documentary, a TV show, but that's getting out there a little bit because, you know, then what do you do for the research? But you might be able to find something. Yeah. Okay, go ahead. Is Jaden?
It's me, Tanya.
Oh, hi. Sorry. I'm looking at the, hi, how you doing?
It says
I see-
student
I
loaner.
see you. Yeah, I've been noticing two people that I see, Maria and Tanya. Okay, go ahead, please.
I was in the library here. I'm at the JC now, and I couldn't find very much information here on my subject about Harry Winston. Excuse me.
Oh, yeah. Mhm.
So, I mean, hardly nothing. And so I had to go into San Francisco to the actual store and sort of
Oh.
pick their brains about it. And
Very
they
creative
gave me
solution.
some information, but he's not photographed because they told me because of insurance reasons, they
Oh,
never photographed him. He would not
Hmm.
allow it.
you mean him
And
personally or some of his product?
him personally, Harry Winston. would
But you
not.
have a photo, I hope, right by now. You've been, I know
I
you
have one, but it's in a book
have an item
that
that you're writing about.
yeah, I have
Oh.
several pictures of items, but I only have, I think there's one picture, and I'm gonna try and get my hands on it so that I can you know, put it in my
Well,
paper.
all you need, this for everybody now, it's a good point. Everybody hears the question, Tanya's, or the scenario she brought up. You only need one image of the actual art object, whether it's a painting or a watch or a building or sculpture, whatever it is. One image, good clear image, is enough to qualify. I mean, to satisfy the requirement. But if you want to provide more images, you can.
Well,
But you don't have to.
okay. I wanted to do one picture of him and then one picture of something.
Which would be
lots of
interesting.
jewels. Yeah, lots of.
I'd be
beautiful
interested. I
jewelry.
don't even know what he looks like. I must have seen pictures of him in some fashion magazine. Some.
They said he was.
Oh, that's
hardly
right. You just told
ever
us.
photographed.
Well, see, there's a fact you can mention in the
Oh,
body of
yeah.
your paper, if you haven't already, you might,
Mhm.
as part of the meaning, and cite whoever told you that or whatever. you
And I
did.
said, why? And
Yeah.
they said, because it would have made a target on his back.
Oh,
If he would have been a target. And they said he also was rebellious and he used to walk around with gemstones, diamonds in his pockets because he liked the
oh.
feel of them,
Now
and his
that's
insurance
an
company
interesting-
didn't know that.
But see, you already got about a half a page of meaning text right there in what you just told us. So obviously you can cite whatever the source was for that as part of your in-text citation and in bibliography. Okay, we should get to the slides. We'll probably end a little early. It depends on how many questions there are. We only have two more, but they're both very rich in meaning and of course do the full formal analysis. They're both architecture slides, but one last time. Now we're talking about just very specific questions. I will, as always, stick around as long as you have any questions at the end of this lecture. And then, of course, check my email tonight and again tomorrow up until at least 5 p.m. For any follow-up questions. Okay. All right. So let's go ahead and get to the first of today's slides, which is not a must know, but I like people to be able to see the settings with my own slides that I've taken over the years. This is the interior of the Louvre. It was in focus, I guess, after a while. It's been digitalized. I think it's been 2 years now. I may have to redo that, but you get the gist of it. This is the Grand Gallery, they call it, in what was not a must know. We're going to get to a must know and just literally, is it somebody else need to join here? Yeah.
That looks familiar.
Yeah, admit, Tamara. Good timing. Tamara, we're just getting started. This isn't the must know, but let's go ahead and hide this so you don't have to see the distracting side images for anybody here. We're just focusing now on the last two slides, but either one could be on the exam, so you do want to take notes. When we get to the must know, which this is not yet that. It's my own slide of the interior of the Louvre, and this is the line of people waiting to see the Mona Lisa. It's in that room. And I know some of you have seen it. I think I remember from your mini bios. It's pretty moving and it's tiny, isn't it? It's very small. Well, now I'm not going backwards because that we covered that weeks ago. I'm not going to talk about that work of art, but I just want you to see the building is a Baroque style building. You don't have to take notes on this slide. Well, I'll tell you when we get to the first must-know. Look at the ceiling. And there's your incrustation. Remember the four elements of Baroque art. An incrustation ornamentation. Every single arch has all kinds of fancy decorative plaster work on it. This wing was done in the 1600s when it was the palace of the kings of France when they stayed in Paris. That's what the Louvre was. It was Napoleon, as some of you know, that converted it to an art museum because he didn't like it. He said it was drafty and cold and damp. So he preferred other palaces. When he became a monarch, even though he promised to give democracy to France, he never did. So what you have was this royal palace that was abandoned by, Napoleon and his first wife, and turned into an art museum, which has become now the largest art museum on earth. And I think it never will be overtaken because it's just an incredibly huge collection from all over the world. So this is a Baroque building. And the skylights were added later, if you're curious. That's not 17th century, not early 1600s. Okay, now we're going to get to the first must know, but we'll do it in two stages. So I'm going to give you the title. The Hall of Mirrors. It's actually this slide, but I want you to see the context. So start taking notes now. It's part of the meaning of this first must know, which is, again, the slide after this is the one that will be the detail you would have if it's on the midterm. Again, the title of this first must know for today is Hall of Mirrors, plural. Everybody knows mirrors has two R's, right? M-A-R-R-O-R-S. Hall of Mirrors. There were two architects who well, I'm giving you the location, Versailles. So actually, you know what? That's part of the meaning because the Hall of Mirrors is a phrase you could use in all kinds of palaces all over, not just in Europe, but in other parts of the world too. A lot of kings like to either look at themselves or whatever, the people that they invited to their palaces. So they'd create a Hall of Mirrors. So I'm sorry, let's restate that full title. It's actually 4 words, if you count, I'll say it again, Hall of Mirrors, comma, Versailles. Now I will spell that. That's the town where this palace is. And I'll bet some of you have been to it. V, capital V, of course, E-R-S-A-I-L-L-E-S. Again, the full title, Hall of Mirrors, comma, Versailles. So it makes it very specific which Hall of Mirrors. Okay, and then the two architects, their last names are Lebrun, that's 2 words, capital L-E, and then capital B-R-U-N, Lebrun, and Mansart. Mansart is, of course, capital M, obviously, M-A-N-S-A-R-T. Lebrun and Mansart, 1678. So here's the first things to write about the meaning. Versailles was the palace of the last several kings, the main palace, you could say, the main palace. They had several, but it was their main and largest palace complex. It's actually a compound, is probably a better word, or a complex, either word would do. It's not one building, it's dozens of buildings spread across, you don't have to know this, but it's 10 square miles. It's the largest royal compound in the world. The next closest is the Forbidden City in Beijing, or at least it was the last time I checked. And that's pretty big, but it's not 10 square miles, not this big. So what we have is the largest royal compound on the world, in the world, or on earth, is Versailles, which is outside Paris, where the last several kings of France spent most of their time. They preferred this complex because it was secluded and protected and away from the masses and the, people that they oppressed, frankly. But anyway, the point is that, they could just be with the upper classes. That's all they invited. You could guess that would be the case. To show off their wealth is why this compound was built. That's another part of the meaning. And you're going to see that in the actual slide of the Hall of Mirrors. But I want you to see the entrance. It's a very nice photo of the gold. Yes, what looks like gold, this is actual gold. Not solid gold, of course, gilded over metal, probably iron. But all of these decorations are symbolic of the various kings of France, or the royal family of France. They were all named Louis, good grief. It was like the last 16 in a row of their kings of France all had the first name Louis. So this palace was built by most of it, just say most of this compound. If I say palace, it implies one building. No way. You can see in this picture, there's already half a dozen buildings just in the entryway, the courtyard. So there was a compound of dozens of buildings, and most of it was built by Louis the 14th. That's an important part of the meaning. Louis the 14th ruled over the high point of the French Empire, and it was a huge empire, which was the largest, wealthiest, however, most powerful empire in the way you got to say Western world during his reign. He ruled for 72 years, 2 years longer than Queen Elizabeth. But he really was a ruler. He had power, real power, and I would say abused it. In any case, he built this compound to show off his. So now let's go to a close-up or a detail of the actual home. So again, if it's on the test, this is the image you'll see. Somebody's I can still hear some background noise. I thought I had one muted, except for those who want to unmute themselves. Somebody has their mic on. Would they please turn that down? Okay, this is the Hall of Mirrors. It's what it looks like when you walk in. It's open to the public. The whole compound is. It's one of the most popular tourist sites in the world. Millions of people. I forget how many, I like 5 million, just say millions. Millions of people from all over the world come to visit this every year because it's not anymore a royal compound or group of buildings. It's not the royal palace. There are no royals in France. They executed them, as you may recall. They came back briefly in the early 1800s, but then they got rid of them a second time. So there are no royal there is no royal family and no monarchy in France, unlike England and other parts of Europe. So this is a public historic site, monument really, and it's open to the public. It's quite an enjoyable experience just to walk through it. So why was this Hall of Mirrors built besides the king? Well, first of all, showing off his wealth. This is gold, what looks like gold. Again, it's not solid gold, but what looks gold, the colored items that look gold, have gold over the gold leaf, it's called, or gilding, right? Gilding is, of course, that's done by jewelers and things to this day, but it was done by kings back then to show off their wealth. Of course, most of it plundered from their colonies, not all of it, but most of it. And so this was meant to show off his power and his wealth, but it also was meant to supposedly show off his good taste because he hired the two most famous architects in France. Some would say in all of Europe, but that's hard to prove. So just say the two most famous architects in all of France, or the whole country, the whole kingdom of France. He hired them to come and live here while they worked on designing this entire set of buildings. But the part he had the most interest and that he had the most control over, he personally supervised them. In other words, the architects, them face to face. He demanded they do everything the way he wanted. Was this section? It's the longest part of this complex, this compound of Versailles. It's over 200 feet long. And it, of course, is named for the fact that it's got mirrors on one wall, but not both walls. Some people think that, but look here, these are windows. So one side is arched, right? Windows, rows and rows of windows looking out on the grounds or gardens. The other side is mirrors. But there's also silver. What looks like silver is actually, of course, the mirrors have some silver in them. Then there's marble of all kinds. And finally, the floor, inlaid parquet floor. So I'll repeat that. These are all very expensive materials, the fanciest you could have at that time for any kind of building. You know, gilding or gold encrusted. Again, you see how Baroque it is. I'll repeat what makes it Baroque in a minute. Over the, mostly in the ceiling, but there's some on the walls too, right? Gold encrusting, or it's called gilding, and that's with Gilded. So gilding over the, right, decorations on the ceiling and some parts of the walls. And then you have marble, different colors of rare colors of marble, mostly probably from Italy. And then there's a little bit of silver worked in here, but mostly behind the mirrors. And then finally, there is very ornate, you could say ornate or fancy inlaid. That's two words with a hyphen, just like it sounds, inlaid, or parquet, if you want to use the right word. Don't worry how to spell it, parquet. It's a fancy type of decorative floor that you know, is the most expensive type of floor to have. So the whole 200, I think it's 220 feet. It's about that. It's over 200 feet, somewhere between 200 and 250 feet. So it's the longest such gallery or hallway of any royal compound in Europe. And there are two more facts about the meeting, and then we'll do a formal analysis. Okay. One of which is what makes it Baroque. Well, you can probably tell by looking that it has an incrustation of ornamentation. It's just overwhelming when you walk beneath this ceiling and look up there. The paintings, there's the plasterwork and the gilding or gold overlay on that. So it's, and then of course, even the walls have some of that, you know, above the mirrors mostly. And in here in the arches. So an incrustation ornamentation is the main feature of this hallway and of all of this Baroque palace complex, especially this hall of mirrors. Then we have the bulbous, you know, rounded shape. So obviously the entire ceiling is that. So are some of the decorative detailings inlaid into the ceiling, you know, inserted. And of course the round arched mirrors and windows. So it's got that bulbous shape to all the main features. And then the unseen presence would be the power of the king of France, whoever was king, because this was then used by his son and grandson later after him. The last king of France was Louis XVI. You don't have to know that, but this guy, Louis XIV, was just the one who created it, and then it was used by two more generations. And they all had major public events in this room to show off their wealth and their power. So we had the unseen presence is the power, and you could say majesty, if you want to use that word, of the kings, plural, whoever was then king, kings of France. And then the intense emotion is awe. Awe. There's really no other word for it, right? I mean, you're supposed to be overwhelmed by this, and quite frankly, it is overwhelming, at least the first time I saw it. Okay, what's the other last part of the meaning is two of the most important events in the history of the world happened in this room. And that's not a minor fact. I'd say it's almost the most important fact about it, besides that it is a part of the Kings of France's royal compound. What two events? Well, let's see. One or two of you may have guessed. One of them had to do with the end of a certain event that happened between certain colonies or former colonies and a country where the queen is being buried actually right as we speak. I think today is the funeral. Anybody know what event I'm talking about that was actually done or signed in this room? It was a ceremony that ended a very important relationship between two countries. Okay. The Treaty of Paris that ended the American Revolution, or you could say Revolutionary War, whichever phrase you prefer. It was signed in this room, and the King of France got to hold as the host the signing where the British ambassador had to eat crow, is putting it mildly. He had to swallow their pride and give independence formally, in other words, legally signed the independence of the United States as no longer colonies of the British Empire. The first ones to rebel, of course, against the British Empire or the American colonies. So I'll say it again, I'll repeat it in a short way. The Treaty of Paris, which ended the American Revolution or Revolutionary War, was signed between Great Britain and the United States in this room. And it was overseen by the King of France. The King of France supported us, in case you did. Well, actually, the French people did too. They supported the American Revolution. They were enemies, rivals of the French. I mean, of the, sorry, I meant the British, obviously. So they were happy to host this event, this signing of a treaty to formally recognize the independence of the American colonies as a new nation. And the other event, there one or two of you know, it's actually called the Treaty of Versailles because it was signed here, and it happened in the early 1900s. Anybody know what that ended? Pretty important event. One or two of you must have.
World War I.
Yes, thank you. Very important event because some people say the roots of World War II were in this room. Here's what you can say. I will keep, I'll summarize it at the end. But what you should write is, well, let's do it first, and then I'll explain a little, and then we'll do the formal elements. The Treaty of Versailles, which ended World War I, was signed in this room. And it was between Germany and its allies and the Western powers like France, England, and the United States and other countries that had fought the Germans. So the Germans were forced to pay all of the expenses. It's called reparations. We've heard that word in this case, to most of the other countries. They were called the Allies, right? The Western countries in Western Europe and North America, like Canada, the US, who had fought them in World War I. What's that have to do with World War II? Everything. The Germans resented being told they were the only villain or the totally the cause of by themselves solely the cause of the whole World War. To be honest, that even back then people knew that wasn't really accurate. And guess who that encouraged to make a rise politically and become dictator of Germany? Hitler. Hitler always thought that when he read about this, he was a soldier, a German soldier, World War I, that was an act that shamed and humiliated the German people, and it was unfair. And so he used that to help his Nazi party take power. And you know what happened after that. I don't have to explain. That led to World War II. So the roots of World War II could be seen and are really in the event that happened 25 years earlier, when in 1919, actually 20 years, sorry, 20 years earlier, when the German delegation, or you could say the Germans or Germany, was forced to pay for all of the cost of World War I by the Allies, that when they signed the Treaty of Versailles in this room. You don't have to know the years of either of those treaties, but that happened to be 1919. And that led to the roots of at least one of the main causes for World War II. So two pretty important events that affected the whole world, obviously, happened in this very room. Okay, that's plenty on the meaning. Let's go back to this is, sharper, right? So if it's on the test, this is the view you'd have. Obviously, there's simulated texture on the ceiling with the paintings and the plaster sculpture, bas-relief paneling, and even on the walls. Lots of simulated texture, but then there's, of course, even more real textures, all smooth, polished wood floors, right? Wood can be rough or smooth, but these are smooth. You don't get splinters walking along these floors as you do in some Parisian apartments if you don't wear shoes. So smooth wood, real textures, smooth marble, of course, on the arches, a smooth glass on the mirrors and the windows. Okay, so those are all real textures. And then we have balance, it's completely symmetrical. Almost all Baroque architecture is. Of course, the arches on the mirrors and the windows are identical in dimension, height, and width. And it is symmetrical. If you draw a line down the middle from the peak of the roof to the floor, it's, and the floor is as wide as the ceiling, of course, so it's balanced both top to bottom and left to right. The rhythm is obvious with the inlay patterns. You don't have to use the word parquet, which is P-A-R-Q-E-E, I think it is, Q-U-E-E, but you can just say inlaid floors. That creates very powerful rhythm, as you can see here, right? And then obviously the windows and the mirrors are the same shape. And these pilasters, they're called, they're not columns. If they're not round, they're not columns. They're just decorative detailing. And they're made out of marble like this one here. That creates rhythm between each set of windows. You don't have to know the name for that, but the word is pilaster, just like it's out the P-I-L-A-S-T-E-R. Pilasters create rhythm, and then all of the ceiling decorations, you see repeated shapes, all symbolic of the wealth and power of the French monarchy. The colors, warm on the ceiling and the floor, cool on the walls. Pretty straightforward there, as far as we can see them. There is visual line around the mirrors and the windows, or the arches, I should say, around the edges of the windows. But there is painted line, of course, on the ceiling in these paintings, and carved line on the gilded plaster ornament. So both, all three kinds of line: carved, painted, and visual lines. The largest mass, it would be the ceiling. If you straighten the ceiling out, because it's so curved and bulbous, it would be heavier than the floor. Then there'd be the floor, and then the two walls would be the third largest masses. There is no distortion of proportion or scale here. These paintings are all realistic, and you can't see that, but you could just write that in terms of the 10th element. We're going to see some distorted proportions and scales when we get to 20th century painting, but that doesn't usually come up until at least the late 1800s in Western art. So what we see here are realistic or accurate, you could say, proportions and scale between the different figures, right, that are painted on the ceiling and the bas-relief panels. There's no inaccurate or distorted proportions or scale on any of the illustrated panels. Okay, and then let's see, what are we missing? Oh, dynamic. Well, almost entirely except for the floor. Well, the pilasters. Okay, the pilasters on the floor, but the mirrors, the windows, the entire ceiling, of course, and even the pattern in the floor of the inlay, obviously all curved or diagonal lines. So it's mostly dynamic, but it is stable in that the walls and the floor are, of course, straight. Let's see. What am I forgetting here? Oh, the largest, I already mentioned largest mass, the rhythm, texture. Oh, modeling. Modeling is just the natural shades from the sun. Okay, I think we've covered all the main elements here. Now, you don't have to write this, but I thought you might be interested to see. I found these after I started teaching this on Zoom. I looked from some more slides. These are images of the king who built it. You don't have to write anything more. You've got plenty of notes on Versailles. And the next must know is coming up in about 2 or 3 minutes, but I want you to see this. This is a plaster life-size, bas-relief panel. Of course, they call them medallions when they're set into the wall of the king himself, Louis XIV, trampling over some Turkish soldiers. Now, the Turks had invaded Europe for centuries, actually, and they got all the way to almost to Vienna. That's pretty far from Turkey. Look at the map. It's like almost 1,000 miles into the heart of Europe. And Louis XIV led several European armies, but his was the largest army of the French Empire, along with some other allies, to stop the Turks from taking Vienna, as well as some other parts of Central Europe. And so he's dressing himself, or had his sculptor dress him as a Roman emperor in triumph, trotting over his defeated enemies, the way a Roman bas-relief panel might have done, 1,500 years before this. And look at the gilding here again. Look at this. And then more mirrors. That's the edge of the Hall of Mirrors. That's what you see when you get ready to walk into it. The place is so crowded that I think you'd never get a picture like that you just saw anytime you visited, unless you have some private access. So obviously it's usually got so many people you can't even see the floors. It's so popular. But anyway, this is the room that is the entryway or antechamber to, and look at these angels. They're crowning him with wreaths, of victory over his. Actually, here's another angel doing literally on the bas-relief panel. And then let's see, I think that might have, yeah, here's another view. Now, this is actually my own slide. I took this slide looking up because he wants you to do that. Let's lower it down to where you can see. There's the defeated Turkish soldier. And there he is, riding triumphantly like an ancient Roman emperor on his favorite white horse. Like most kings, they always had a favorite horse. And then here's the angels, both the plaster bas-relief one, right? And then here the gilded plaster ones up above with, trumpets sounding him, the glory of their king. He was probably the most powerful man in the world during his lifetime. In the sense that because that empire was so big. And that's when they started colonizing parts of Africa and Asia too, including Vietnam, which was, I think, the first, or not one of the first French colonies outside of the Mediterranean and Europe. And so they had a worldwide empire. Whole chunks of North America, of course, were ruled by the French before the British overtook them. All right, let's get to the next must know. And it's the last one that you need to take notes on before the first midterm. This is St. Paul's Cathedral. St. Paul's with an apostrophe S, just like one of the saints from, the followers of Jesus, right? Cathedral, I think you all know, but I'll spell that, how to spell that word. C-A-T-H-E-D-R-A-L. Of course, St. Paul's Cathedral, 3 words. The architect, Wren, that's capital, of course, W-R-E-N, Wren. He was the most influential and famous of all British architects during his lifetime. We'll explain why in a minute. Wren, and then the date it was completed, 1710. They've already had some parts of this long, boy, it is 10-day long set of ceremonies for the funeral of Queen Elizabeth in Britain. That's been going on for now. It's the 10th day. Part of the ceremonies earlier on, when her casket was brought to London, I think the first thing they did was have an event here, a memorial event inside this. So what is this building? It's the Cathedral of London. Literally, it is the main, you could say, there's more than one cathedral in London, but it's the main cathedral, the official, you could say, cathedral of the Church of England, which is not a Catholic group, but they're very similar. Some of you know this if you've been to, I think a couple of you, right, have been to this building or certainly been to London. So this building has been the official cathedral of the Church of England in London. So it's the main London cathedral of their most dominant religion, which is a Protestant denomination. It broke off from Catholic Catholicism centuries ago. So that's only a small part of the meaning. So what are we looking at here? We're looking at a view with the city streets. Now somebody's microphone's on again. I can never remember if that's, I don't want to interrupt the lecture, but it's distracting. Okay, one more time. I'll see if we could just get somebody to voluntarily mute themselves. Hello? Okay, so what are we looking at? We're looking at the narrow streets leading to the front of the cathedral, which when it opened was surrounded by historic buildings. And we're going to talk about that part of the meaning in a minute. But first, let's look at the building itself. Oh, no, we still have. Okay, it's a Baroque cathedral, and Wren was the first Baroque architect in Great Britain and the most influential because of that. He studied in Italy, where, of course, Baroque started. And then he came back to where he was from England. He came back to England and became the top architect in the British Isles. That would be England, Scotland, Wales, and Ireland, the top architect in the British Isles. He even designed one building in this hemisphere, and it's still standing. Some of you may know this, but if you don't, and you're ever in Virginia, it's pretty impressive that a building 1,000 miles away from the architect who designed it is not only part of his legacy, but still being used the way he designed it. It's the main building for the College of William and Mary in Virginia. So he was very influential, and his buildings are all over the British Isles, plus, like I said, one here in North America on the East Coast. Okay, well, Baroque, we know as part of the meaning. Remember that if any of your haven't finished your meaning section on your works of art that you're writing about, or you have, but you want to double check that you really covered everything. Don't forget, part of the meaning of any work of art is what style is it? And how do you know what features mark that work of art as a particular style? So that's always the case with the architecture. I always will give you those features. What makes it Baroque? Well, it couldn't be more bulbous. Look at it. You've got one clock face and one never installed, but these are clearly rounded shapes, as is the dome, and the drum is the base of a dome, right? So the drum and the dome itself, even the cupola, look at that, right, is the room resting on top of the drum. That is very bulbous, and the towers, both towers are. So it's obviously got those elements that mark it as Baroque, the bulbous shapes. Incrustation of ornamentation, absolutely. You see it here on all the sculptures here and all the various, these are saints, various different saints, I guess, even from the Bible, right? Who are, lining the parapets, and the top of the pediment. That's the triangle. You could just say the roof. And inside here in that section, that's, if you want to know the word, the pediment is a triangular shape of the top of a classical building. Pediment. You don't have to use that word if you don't want to, but you can see what I mean. But this ornament everywhere you look, above the windows, and if you could see them also above the doors. By the way, anybody seen the movie, the original movie, Mary Poppins? There's a song where this church is in the background, Feed the Birds. That's from that children's book. This has been a popular place for Londoners to just even walk by or sit outside. You can see them sitting on the stairs, have picnics, a cup of coffee or tea, what have you, or go inside. It's open to the public, at least last time I checked, I think 7 days a week. And yes, it's a functioning church or cathedral. All right, and then we have the unseen presence would be God, of course, and the communion with God, your whatever prayers that you would hopefully feel if you're inside, a connection. That's the goal, at least, of the church design. All churches, really, all houses of worship, to get closer to a higher being. So the unseen presence is God. And then finally, the emotion, the intense emotion is, again, I would say awe, or you can say, majestic feeling that you should get from going inside this church is incredible. So has anybody here been inside St. Paul's? I thought 1 or 2 people said they have been to London, right? Anybody? It's just amazing inside. It's very typically Baroque, but you don't have to know what the interior looks like for this.
I have.
I thought you had, yeah. What did you think of it? What impressed you most about it?
Gosh, everything. I love
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
it's just, the building itself.
And the ceiling, isn't it?
Yes, the ceilings and the columns and
Yeah,
clock and the cupola and I don't know. it's just a
yeah. Did
beautiful
you get to
building.
go up and towards the? I never been on the cupola.
A long time ago?
Oh well, then you
Long time ago.
got to do something I always wanted to do. Somehow when I went, it wasn't open, I think. And then there's also the choir, the organ. I meant well, actually, the choir booths or stalls, and the organ is impressive. It's very ornate, isn't it? Yeah, the whole interior is very Baroque. It's beautiful structure. Okay, the other part of the meaning, okay, is what happened to it. And I'm going to go back now. So let's see how some of you may be able to tell if you know something. I know some of you do about the difference between modern architecture and historic architecture. This is true all over the world, not just in the Western world or Europe or America. So what do we notice here? It should be obvious these are modern buildings, right? This little one, and this here, and then this a little bit more recent. It's older, but it's not 350 years old or almost. St. Paul's was begun in 1670, so that's over 350 years ago. It was designed. So this is from the 1800s or Victorian. And then we have this is by random, one other small church nearby. But why can this, the next point about the meaning is, what happened to this building at sometime in the mid 20th century, I think some of you can know, or near this building, that caused so many of the buildings around it to be modern, with very few historic buildings nearby. Can anybody guess, or do any of you know what happened in the mid 1900s? Some of you know, in London. Well, pretty major world event. Again, one that we referred to just a few minutes ago.
The Battle of Britain.
Yes, exactly. The Battle of Britain, or you can say the Blitz. That's how they use the one word. That means the bombing. You could say it that way. The bombing of London for over a year and a half, day and night, by the Nazis. They tried, here are the facts. You can just listen and then I'll summarize it, because it's part of the meaning. It's an amazing fact about this building. And those of you who've been to London, especially if you took a tour of this building or read about it, would probably know this. But if you don't, you should write this as one last thing about the meaning, and then we'll do a formal analysis and I'll take questions. We'll probably end a little early, but I'll repeat for those who joined a little after the instructions one more time for submitting the papers. But to finish up on the meaning here, what happened with the bombing of London around this church is that Hitler personally, you could just say the Nazis, but it was Hitler himself, wanted to destroy this church badly. He really wanted to destroy it because he figured it would make the British morale sink. It would, like the Russians are doing in the Ukraine right now. I mean, it's typical when one country attacks another. What they're trying to do is destroy the morale of their civilians. We're talking about the citizens. Over 100,000 people died during that year and a half of bombing of London. Conventional bombing we're talking about, right? Almost every day and night. This cathedral, they kept, the Nazi bombing raids kept attacking and trying to destroy. Well, obviously they didn't succeed. What they did was destroy most of the buildings around it, which is why they're mostly, I see even that one there behind it, are mostly modern. So what finally happened, this is the more amazing part about it, is one night, one bomb from a German bomber actually penetrated the dome. In other words, 500-pound bombs can destroy, a building even this big if they hit the foundation. So it actually made a hole in the dome. It hit the dome. Finally, after months of trying to hit this building, they couldn't hit it at all. One bomb went through, one German bomb, all the way into the floor, buried itself in the crypt underneath the floor, and did not explode. So you decide whether that's an act of, however you want to say, of God or higher power, or just a miracle, or just a coincidence. Well, here's the final touch of meaning, or detail, I should say, about the meaning of that. The next day, when Churchill heard that that's what had happened, he arranged for a group of photographers from all over the world to follow him inside the church. And there's a famous photo of him standing above the bomb pit, because a 500-pound bomb is huge, as big as a house, with just the fins of the bomb sticking up out of the floor, and him standing there with one of his cigars. And then the caption, one newspaper, I imagine it was a British paper, wrote under that photo was, "Eat this, Adolf." Guess what? Hitler said, "Stop, don't try to bomb the building anymore. It's going to make us look bad." So it had the opposite effect of what the intended result was. It actually boosted British morale and, of course, their resistance when there wasn't anybody else, until they finally invaded Russia, of course, and then things shifted. But at that point, the British were alone fighting the Nazis, and for whatever else we can say about that, that took some bravery, and that was a turning point, because just that incident, where a bomb should have destroyed part of the building, if not collapsed the dome, didn't do anything, just caused a hole in the roof and the floor, and they repaired it. And then the German bombers were ordered not to continue trying to hit the building. So it's your last fact about the meaning, if you want to summarize that, if it's on the exam, of course, the midterm. All right, let's do a formal analysis. For that, we have to go back to, whoops, I went the wrong way, to the front view. Completely symmetrical. Almost every Baroque church or building, even a palace or whatever, in the Baroque era is going to be just like earlier Renaissance style buildings, symmetrical, left to right. But here we clearly see it's weighted or unbalanced toward the bottom, of course, because there's empty space between the bell towers. The dome is the largest mass. It might not look like it, but if you've been to this building or seen even films, almost every movie set in London where they spend time in the old part of London, well, you'll see this building somewhere in the film. The dome is the largest mass, and then it's a close call. Probably you could say either the main facade, if you count this as a single mass, but some people would break it into two sections because of this dividing section here. So if you do it that way, then the towers, I would say that's it. The second largest masses of the two identical twin towers, one just missing a clock face. And then the central facade would be the third largest. For space, it's a large open domed room, as you were telling us, Tanya, and anyone who goes in there will see very, very large open all the way up. You could see up to the cupola, and that is about 350, just say nearly, not quite, it's almost 350 feet of open domed space inside this church. I don't remember the length of the nave, you don't have to know that, but the height of the dome is in the ballpark of, it's just a little less, just under the 350 feet. That's even taller, not by much, but slightly taller than the dome of St. Peter's in Rome. This is often compared to that, and it was meant to be a building that could be compared to St. Peter's in Rome. When it was designed, Wren said that's one of his goals, to rival the grandeur of the largest church, which that is still the largest church in the world. Some say this is the second largest. The one in Rome is still the largest Christian church in the world, and this would be second largest. With a dome, though, that's slightly higher. So one large open dome room is the real space inside, with reaching a height of almost 350 feet. The rhythm is obvious with the columns and the doors and windows, the arches, the two bell towers, repeated shapes everywhere you look. The color is cool white marble and kind of bluish gray metal. That's metal, where the one German bomb caused a hole in there is, of course, totally been repaired. So there's really no warm colors visible, at least in this image. Inside there are, but not on the exterior. The modeling is the deep shadows from the sun, of course. You can especially notice behind the portico. Portico is the columns porch, the porch with columns. The White House has porticos. A lot of other private residences do, and public buildings, courthouses, state capitals, the U.S. Capitol. This is porticos or column porches. You could say it either way. That's where the deepest modeling is, the deepest shadows. But that's all created by the sunlight. There's no artificial modeling. The lines, well, you've got carved line. Don't see any painted line here. Inside you would, but on the exterior, on the sculpture, the statuary, and above some of the doors and windows, especially the windows. Then there's also visual line. There always is in building of the, edges formed by, the corners, and those create visual lines. So you've got both visual and carved line visible here. And then let's see, stable. The bottom half is roughly stable. I would have to, except for the arches on the windows, because the columns, right, and the overall central facade. But the bell tower is certainly from the middle. Actually, this is the towers, by the way. You don't have to know it's a tower. Has a foundation. By its definition, it can't just be the top part. So this is the actual two towers are from the ground all the way up to the top of those finials, those decorative details. So that upper half of that is dynamic, the upper half of both towers. And of course, the dome and the drum beneath it are obviously dynamic. Everything else on the bottom half is stable. Let's see. Nothing is out of proportion or scale, because all of the sculpture are both human. I don't think there are any animals, actually, human and divine, like biblical figures as well as actual human beings. All of the sculptural figures, you could just say, have normal proportions and scale. There's no distorted or altered proportions anywhere in this building. I think I've covered everything. Oh, texture, sorry. The texture is the real smooth texture of marble and metal and glass on the windows. Okay, so that's the last must know. Now, I do have a couple of others that I'm going to show you, but they're not on the syllabus, so you don't have to write about these. Well, actually, just one. Yeah, just one. And that is a house in New England, which is medieval. You don't have to write this. I just thought it might be of interest to some of you if you're back in New England. This is in Massachusetts. It's one of the houses where one of the several judges who condemned those poor innocent teenage girls, 20 of them, to death by hanging. Actually, one of them was a man. Yeah. So 19 girls and then one adult man to be hung for witchcraft in the Salem witch trials. So this isn't in the town of Salem. It's a town not too far away, where one of those judges came from this house where he lived. The house is already several years old. He had just built it. He was a judge and a minister. Back then, that was, the way the government of Massachusetts was. It was run by religious, of course, leaders. So he came from here to Salem to hear the so-called testimony, obviously fake, about witchcraft, and was one of the ones who condemned the others to die. But the house itself is what's the focus of why I have this here. And in some of the other sections I've taught of this class, I actually have this on the syllabus. Well, you've got plenty already, so you don't need to add this. But it's called the parson. That would mean minister. Right, Parson Capon House. It is one of the best preserved medieval. Yes, it is a medieval house that was then a colony, of course, now the United States. There are hundreds of them on the East Coast. They're hand-built wooden houses that look exactly like they would have 3, 4, 5 centuries earlier in England, or even at the same time in the 1600s in England. People not in London anymore. They were not doing medieval architecture in London by the 1600s. You just saw a Baroque church from that period. But out in the countryside, small towns and villages, people still built homes the way their great ancestors had, made out of wood and brick, and with very small windows and very thick, heavy walls, and an overhang, this is called, a second story projecting out over the first, and almost no decoration or ornament, very little, because they didn't have the money, the time, or the desire to decorate their homes. These are simple wooden houses. They're called salt boxes. That's the nickname for this type or shape of house. But there are hundreds of them in New England and some parts of the northern, southern, what were the southern colonies. Most of them are open to the public, and this one is as historic museums. And it's fascinating to walk through and see how these people lived for 300 or 400 years ago, or more than 300 years. Anyway, that's just for your information. It's in a town called Topsfield, which is a beautiful little country town about 30 miles or something outside of Boston. And there are many, many others all over New England and the Northeast. Okay, so we'll do the stop share now, and then I'll stick around for any questions you guys may have about anything we just covered or that I didn't already answer about your papers. Remember, they're due before midnight. Please don't push that boundary. I have to enforce some kind of cutoff, or it's not fair to the people that turn theirs in on time. Now, of course, if something happens and you have a medical or family emergency, it's not my rule, remember, it's the district's rule, which would be just that I need to see any kind of visual evidence. A screenshot is fine. If something, having to do with, like, if you had a family emergency and you had to leave town on the day the paper was due or this week, well, you probably know by now if you did, or you got sick suddenly or had a medical emergency, injury, whatever. There should be some evidence of that, from a doctor's visit or prescription, or if you travel because you had family emergency, of course, a record of the travel, a ticket, a plane ticket, or whatever. That's a requirement that the district set up. If that is the case, then you need to send me that as soon as possible, and then I will not take points off until after 7 days when the deadline has passed. If you wait and turn it in about a day or less than a week, in other words, 1 to 6 days late, you can turn them in even later than that. But then it's only 5 points off. I've already mentioned this is my late policy. It's more flexible. Some people say too lenient than many other professors at the JC. I'll accept late work. It's 5 points off if it's under, anything from, past midnight, Wednesday, until before the following Wednesday, which would make it a week late. And for 7 days or beyond that, if it's 7 days or more late, then it goes to 10 points off, and it doesn't go up after that. So in case something happens and you decide you want to take more time, or say you couldn't find research on a topic you were thinking of, enough research, and you decide to switch topics, you can make up the few 5 or 10 points deduction for being late with extra credit. But I don't recommend you doing that. It's best to get it done, because then we're following up right away with our first midterm, and then there's a second midterm a few weeks after that. So it almost always happens that if people wait more than a few days even to turn in a late paper, it backs up, your backlog, right, of assignments and due dates begin to pile up, and that usually leads to a poorer grade than you otherwise would have. So try to get it in on time by midnight on Wednesday. Okay, any other questions?
I just had a question
Sure.
about the test for next week. So I know it says we have to log in to Zoom at 6:40, but I guess my question is, are we staying on the Zoom call the entire time?
No, that's when I was told I would be teaching an evening class. So thank you. You've just helped. I would have caught that, but you helped me well in advance. I'm going to email everyone, not right now, but tonight sometime. So you'll see before the Wednesday class. I thought I had switched that to what it should be, which of course would be 10 minutes after 3, because you need to have, if you want to, up to, because the time for this class is set. So because I was going to teach another section of it and they canceled it, like they did a bunch of classes, you may have heard that they canceled a lot more than I've ever seen of art history section. So unfortunately, they didn't give people time to see if they could get their enrollment, or teachers, enough time to see if the enrollment would go up by the week before class. They canceled some 3 weeks ahead of time. But I'd already put my syllabus together. So this class is only, you are not required to log in the evening. You've got lives, you've got families, you've got other jobs and other classes. So if that's a typo that I didn't catch, let me look. I'll see it right now, because it's got to be right for, yep. My bad. Thank you. You just made it a little bit more clear. I would have made that announcement and put it in writing and an email and hold up on the screen. I will do that on Wednesday. It's not 6:40. that wouldn't be fair to people who have other things they need to do. The time for the class is when the test will be, which means 3. So I am going to put the first slide on the screen at about 3:10. So try to log in by 3:05. Most of you have by 3:03 is when I usually start talking. And I'll give you a few minutes before the actual test start to ask last minute questions.
Wait, so we are, so we are taking the test in the Zoom call? I thought we were
Yes.
just
I'm
like joining
confused.
it and then we were having the test and then we had until midnight to.
You
turn
have
it
until
in.
midnight. Yes, it's a real-time test. Oh, yes. Now that I know, I've explained the first week of class, plus that's in the, I just looked at, that's in the syllabus. But you correctly, I do want to admit, concede, whatever, acknowledge that that's something I should have caught sooner. It's not an evening class, so I can't require you to look at the slide. It is a real-time class during the time the class is scheduled. It has to be. That's the college district's rule. I can't ask you to look at slides in the evening when you haven't been in an evening class on in this section. It's only afternoon. So the slides will be on the screen during the time frame that all the lectures have been. And you'll get at least, well, actually 2 emails as a double reminder. But I'm going to also restate that when we do the lecture. And I'm doing it now on Wednesday when I explain how the test will be given. It's not 6:40. That is my mistake. I apologize. I don't know what else I can do now except say that is not what it's going to be, and it wouldn't be right or fair to any of you because you're not used to logging in the evening. But then you do have, to answer the other half of your questions, the good news for everyone is you guys have longer than my in-person class to do the whole test. You have until midnight to turn it in on the day of the test, which is Monday, the 26th. Now that is correct. You see that here, right? The test itself will be on Monday, and that is the 26th. 1 week. Well, let's see, what are we doing here? Midterm exam is right, because we're right, exactly 1 week from today. We're on the 19th, so 1 week from today is the test. We're going to spend the whole class reviewing for it. I'll send 2 different emails with stating the same information that we're now confirming. You will need to be logging in, just like you have been, to see the questions and to start your answers. Some of you will be able to finish during that time because I'll leave, you know, the test will take all the time we usually do up until 4:15. And then you'll have till midnight to go back, check your answers, make changes, add facts, whatever. And then midnight is the cutoff on the 26th. That's it. Now that is in the syllabus correctly. And that's the cutoff. But you guys actually get a couple hours longer than my in-person class, which has until 9:30 in an in-person lecture where they're actually sitting in the classroom, of course, looking at the slides. So you do have a slight advantage in that regard. But I do apologize again. That's just my fever
So-
brain. It's not 6:40, it's 3:10 will be when the
Okay.
first slide will be on the screen. So yeah, now is a good time to make sure you make a note of that and cross that off. In fact, we all do that. I'm going to do it now. And I'll send an email tonight because not everybody is here at this lecture. And again, repeat it Wednesday when we do the review. And again, over the weekend. So you'll have like 3 reminders. So just cross off this 6:40 and put 3:10.
So it is a live test.
Yes, it is. Oh, absolutely. No,
Okay.
yeah, that is correct on my syllabus. That it doesn't need to be changed. Yes, it's a live exam. Absolutely.
Okay.
And it has to be because otherwise it's not fair to the in-person students. That would be completely unfair. That they get an in-person exam and have to do it in the time frame that they're sitting there, and everybody else can take, you know, like 2 or 3 days or something. So it's a real-time test in the Zoom session on the time frame that we always have been using. And you'll get another 2 more reminders of that by email.
And with
Yes.
my, for my accommodation, how does that work?
Well, you have until midnight. So time and a half would be
Okay.
like, it's a 1 hour exam, meant to be an hour, but time and a half would give you, an hour and a half, more, total of 90 minutes, but you're going to have, let me do the math, 9 hours, or not quite 9 hours. From the last slide being off the screen, about 4:50, you're going to have almost 8 hours. So I've already checked with the, when I first started doing these Zoom lectures, I confirmed with, what that means for a test, which is that if you're in an in-person class, then I take you to a room down the hall and you have an extra 50%, half, time and a half, right? Literally. A 1 hour test, that means an extra 90, an extra 30 minutes. So, but it doesn't have anything to do with this because you have the whole time until midnight. That's way more than time and a half. That's 4 times the normal amount of time that in-person classes have. Okay, so you already by definition will have the extra time. And of course, at this point, being an open book test is the same for everybody. It's the same on the in-person classes and in any of the online classes that I know, all of the other art history instructors, of course, who do Zoom. And many of them make it real time, like you have to submit it right after the last slide, but I don't do that. I give it to them. So that gives you the extra time. Okay. All right. Any other questions? Because that's what we're here for now. And then you will have plenty of time to ask more questions if they occur to you during the review session on Wednesday. And you want to be here. And now that will get recorded. But the exam won't be. Otherwise, again, we're just having a completely uneven playing field. And again, this is something we do. See, we have our department meetings where we discuss this. If the in-person students have just that in-person time frame to do the test, how do we even the playing field? Well, we give you guys the extra time in the evening until midnight. Why? I'll tell you why. Because you might need a few minutes, well, you will, to convert your answers, whether you write them out during the test longhand or rewrite them later before midnight, or you do it as a doc. You got to convert it to a PDF. Absolutely, that's not my role. That's all, not just art classes, but all the classes in the JC. PDFs are required because it's the most accessible, right? So that means you'll have plenty of time to do the converting, doing screenshots if you hand printed them, or converting everything into just a doc, or if you did it as a Word doc, convert that into a PDF and submit that as a PDF file by midnight on the 26th. So you guys will have plenty of time to do that, after the last slide finishes at 4:30 or so, then you'll still have almost 7.5 hours to do a review of your answers, to double check your facts, rewrite something if you choose to, and convert them to PDF. I'll repeat all this again on Wednesday and again with an email over the weekend. All right, one more time. Any other questions? I think we covered a lot today, considering that this is an important part. Now, your papers, I'm excited to see them, and I look forward to hopefully getting the vast majority of them on Wednesday certainly before midnight. And then if you had one you want me to look at or a question about something, I need to have those either by tonight or tomorrow before 5 p.m. to get back to you with feedback. Okay. Anybody else have any questions? Thank you guys all. Yeah, okay. Oh, yes, you could, but what time do you have to leave? You have another class at the same time as this class? 7 p.m. You didn't hear, I just said the test is going to be between 3:10 and 4:30. Yeah, so that won't affect you. See, that's another reason we have to stick to the time frame that the class is not an asynchronous class, right? Obviously. I know. Again, that's good thing you asked. Everybody see that? That's still uncertain. You're going to get so many reminders, you'll get sick of them. That I made a mistake. I already just said, if you would now take your pen and cross out the 6:40 or 6:45 and put 3:10, right, as the login. I mean, try to log in before that if you can. So give you a few minutes to catch your breath and get set up with your whatever format you're going to write your answers, whether hand printed with an ink pen or in a doc, Word doc. Okay, right. So that won't have any effect or conflict for you guys. If you have a class after this one, there's no issue, right? You still have till midnight to turn in the exam as a PDF in this class. Okay. Thank you very much, you guys. Appreciate your, input and comments and questions. And I'll see you all on Wednesday and we'll do the review. Okay, see you then. Take care. Bye.
Wait a minute,
Oh, yes,
the slides that you show us,
sure.
do you have those in your YouTube thing?
Yeah,
Okay, that's what I
this
thought you
is
said.
recording and they'll all be posted,
Mhm.
every single slide from the syllabus.
That's
But
what I
again,
thought. Mhm.
yeah, once you'll see when we finish on Wednesday, it'll be a lot fewer slides that you have to even think about. We'll cut at least 30, 35. Well, I said a third, that's 33%, at least that much
Okay,
from these. So yeah, by the end of the review session on Wednesday, you'll know that it's just what's left over. And those will all be posted. They already are on YouTube, including the ones from today. Yes, I'm posting
Okay.
this on YouTube. Probably by Thursday. Okay. Any other questions? All right, you guys, see you on Wednesday. And so
Thank you.
hopefully everybody will be logged in by 3:05, so we have maximum time for the review for the midterm. Okay, take care. I look forward to seeing your papers on Wednesday. Bye.